Countdown to the showdown now, just one day away from the CNN presidential debate. The simulcast you can watch right here on Fox 5 tomorrow night. Here's the deal. The face-off between the current president and the former president, code critical for campaigns as they make their case to voters. So, can we expect these two legendary rivals to behave or not, to give us good information or not? Let's find out. Joining me now, Democratic strategist Crystal Knight, Republican strategist Corinne Clark. Good to see both of you this morning. Crystal, I want to start with you, first of all. The pressure on President Biden. He spent much of the last couple of months, slipping a little bit in these polls. He spent the last couple of weeks preparing for the debate. What does he have to do to come out on top?
The president has to come out strong and show that he is clearly competent. I think many people are watching his behavior to see if there's any kind of mental lapses. But I think what the strong point that President Biden can make is the comparison between who Donald Trump is, a twice impeached convicted felon who's been accused of sexual assault, fraud charges. Those are the things that the president has to distinguish. Also, how former President Trump plans to really change the immigration policy. That's something that I'm expecting this debate to actually reveal. And I think what Americans are watching is President Biden's behavior, his demeanor. There have been many questions about how he appears in public. So if he has a strong appearance, I believe that this will be a winning testimony for the president.
Corinne, the challenger here always has a slight advantage over the incumbent because they don't have to worry about what's happening right now. They just have to talk about what should be different. And that's an area where Donald Trump excels. What does he have to do to come out on top?
I think you're completely right. That's true. He has the upper hand. And what is nice about being the challenger here is that he also has this great record to run on. So I think he has to remind people how good the economy was under him, the border security under President Trump. And actually, if they bring up all of the points that Chris still mentioned as a strength for Biden, I think that those are strong points for Trump to remind everyone of the lawfare against Trump. That's a very popular issue for him. That rallies our base. To remind everyone that the DOJ and the Biden administration have come after Trump. That's a very good strength for Trump. And I do think that Biden has more to lose here because any slip up really could cost him the candidacy. I think people are really looking for him to prove that he is competent. And if he has any mental lapse, it's going to be an excuse for the Democrats to replace him.
Crystal, let's expand on that a little bit, because unfortunately in 2024, in this era, you're looking for viral moments, right? If people don't watch the debate, they're certainly going to be on their social media, whether it be TikTok or whatever, to see those individual moments, maybe not within the context of the entire debate or even the entire argument that was being made. So how much a danger, I guess, is that when you look at the strategies of debates in 2024?
Well, I think there's a great danger in how the president appears. I would have to agree with Connie. People are really trying to determine if President Biden is still mentally acute to continue leading this country for the next 4 years. And so whatever his team has to do, however he appears, that will be a strong signal to folks. I also think, like you said, the court of public opinion on social media, people will absolutely tweet and, make posts about his positions, his policy positions, what he's done for the economy, infrastructure. We talked about immigration. Abortion is another big topic. And so these are all things that folks are looking to President Biden to talk about what he's done, what he plans to do, and how he's really going to counter Trump's policies should he be reelected versus what he's done while he's been in office.
To the point of planning what to do, and Crystal and Corinne, you guys have laid everything out perfectly. Thank you so much for doing that in a very easy way to understand. I'm old enough to remember when a presidential debate was about what's going to happen in the next 4 years. Both of these people who will be on the stage have been pretty good at talking about what the past has brought, either good or bad. So I guess my question to you, Corinne, is what do we expect from Donald Trump? Is it going to be more, here's what's going to happen if I'm in the White House, or more of, here's what has not made me happy based on what happened in the past?
I think it's a good combo, and that's actually speaks to what the American people want to hear, I believe, is we have to lay out the case, right? So these are the things we don't like. So that's a little bit of talking about the past. And here are the things that I will change. And that's talking about the future. And I think that that's a great combination. That's a winning combination. And we've seen Donald Trump perform very well in debates, especially, in the Republican primaries in 2016. He took out 16 formidable candidates. He did very well in the 2020 debates against Biden. I do think Biden is a particularly tough opponent for Trump because he thrives on getting under people's skin. I don't think he does that as well for Biden, and Biden is, because of his lack of mental competency, kind of a wild card in the debates. So I think that will be the biggest challenge for Trump, is actually just trying to predict what's going to get Biden, what's going to trap him into saying some unfortunate things for him. But I think that's a difficult premise when you're working with such an unpredictable candidate.
Last question. We got to wrap this up, Crystal, but I'll throw it at you. And Corinne, if you want to weigh in, please do so. But we got to keep it super quick. You mentioned the wild card. It's really coming down to wild card versus wild card in this debate. There are a lot of people who are just like, they'll be honest, like not a fan of either candidate on this particular roster because we've been there before. But because of the wild card factor, do you think that this debate will be like one of the most watched ever, or do you think people will stay away? Crystal, what do you think?
Well, I think people will watch it. Obviously, the next one isn't until September, so this is the only thing people have to hold on to for the next couple of months. But I do think that I expect high viewership, and I expect this to really determine how polls will change moving forward.
That's interesting. Corinne, you think high viewership as well?
I think so, especially for Democrats, because this is the only debate before their convention, and this is when they have to decide if this is the guy that they're going to be going with.
Yeah, it's a great point. Thank you guys both for being with us. Republican strategist Corinne Clark and Democratic strategist Crystal Knight. Thank you so very much. Enjoy the debate on Thursday. We'll reconnect afterward, and we'll see if we can determine a winner based on the debate stage, at least tomorrow night.